you guys heard about how amazing and interesting the West is?
Yeah, but how is someone like me gonna get all the way to the other side of the country?
Just hop on a train. And if you're worried about land, the Homestead Act gives you land if you settle on it for 5 years.
The West held great appeal to the average blue-collar worker, as their lives tended to be very dull, monotonous, and overall unhappy, as they were paid very little in their factory jobs. The spread of the rail lines west, due to government bureaucracy, helped people migrate west faster, as they no longer had to make the long journeys of the wagon trains of old. The western territories, such as Utah and the Dakotas, had held much promise to the average worker in the industrial East. Oh dang!
Hey,
looky
there's
here.
a buffalo.
I see him. All right. You
Should
want
I-
me to blast him?
You go ahead.
All right. He'll make a nice place on my wall. Oh yeah.
Let's take him what?
The decimation of the great American buffalo was a sad affair and unnecessarily cruel. Buffalo were hunted down and killed by the millions, all to give the new settlers food, trophies, and to clear the way for the dozens of new rail lines crossing the plains. About 35 years later, the plains changed completely by the white people who modernized it with towns. The Plains Indians, however, took a different approach to killing the buffalo.
Look, Crowfoot, that buffalo has enough meat and hide on it to feed our families for days.
Of course, I see it. How could I miss it? It's so big. We gotta bless it after we kill it with the blessings of the great spirit chief. Oh yeah.
We did it. Thank the chief that our arrows flew true.
Yes. And now, help me cart this big thing away.
The natives differed greatly in their attitude towards killing the animals who let their people survive. The natives relied on the buffalo because they couldn't grow crops on the nutrient-poor plains, and the Americans shooting and trophy hunting the buffalo destroyed their way of life. Now they had to rely on the Americans for food because they couldn't make or hunt it themselves.
The differences in culture of the natives and white settlers, as well as those settlers living on native land, led to serious conflicts, which were named the Indian Wars. During the war, the Indians suffered defeat after defeat with only one victory at Little Big Horn against General Custer's troops, where they wiped out an entire cavalry regiment, utilizing their overwhelming forces to defeat his troops with relative ease. Their efforts, however, were in vain. America had too many advantages, and the natives were powerless to stop them. The last major attempt of the natives resisting American control revolved around the Ghost Dance religious movement.
Welcome, my brethren. Today we are gathered here to ask the great spirit chief to grant us his blessing and aid us in our battles against the white man. Hopefully, he will bless this humble piece of clothing and make it resistant to the white man's guns, allowing us to have victory over them and to be able to secure our lands for the future and for our children.
The natives were desperate, and their last idea was to ask the gods to save them. And even though they weren't completely convinced it would work, they had nothing else left. It was their do-or-die moment.
The result of the battle at Wounded Knee was an overwhelming defeat for the natives. Their last attempt to ward the Americans off failed, as their beliefs could not make a shirt bulletproof. Nothing left to resist them. The Americans took the last part of the natives' land, and America was now explored throughout, with the western frontier closing and the end of Manifest Destiny.
I hope this shirt won't protect me against the white men. Ugh.
Industrialization and urbanization developed at the same time in post-Civil War America. No plumbing in the cities led to rapid spread of disease, which killed workers and provided an opportunity for immigrants to take their jobs. Immigration rose with the increase of American industrialization, and they worked for smaller wages, which the American workers didn't like because they were losing their jobs to immigrants who would do more work for less pay. This hatred of immigrants grew and led to the American government creating laws restricting immigration. Americans developed groups that opposed immigrants and turned public opinion against them. Despite these attempts to stop the flow of immigration continued at a rapid pace and continued to grow until the Quota Acts later in the 1920s.
They rob our jobs. They rob our jobs. They rob our jobs. They rob our jobs. I'm done.
Americans were angry because they had to compete with immigrants to get a job. These workers used their common hatred of immigrants to form groups like the Nativists and demanded the government to protect their jobs.
Other workers continued to try and change the payment issue. Rather than increasing pay, American author Henry George took a different approach. With his best-selling book, Progress and Poverty, George inspired many Americans to take a different approach to change their already poor conditions. Along with another popular book, Looking Backwards by Edward Bellamy, new viewpoints were taken, different reform movements grew.
Hey Joe, have you read the new book?
What new book?
It's called Progress and Poverty by Henry George.
Sounds interesting. What's it about?
It's about the inequalities in wealth caused by industrialization. The publisher proposed a solution to poverty by replacing all taxes with a single tax on land.
Sounds interesting. I'll have to check it out later.
Nice.
Even with all the worker attempts to create a better lifestyle for themselves, better conditions and pay didn't come until the 1920s. Meanwhile, women started to complain about how alcohol was causing major problems in their lives, with their husbands spending money on booze instead of rent or food. This was known as the temperance movement, which tried to ban alcohol consumption. The women's suffrage movement was also a prominent movement during this time period, advocating for women's voting rights.
I hate how my husband is always drunk when he gets home from work. After spending all our money on drinks, it's not fair. Congress needs to make a law about this.
I agree with you. Also, I don't think it's fair that we don't have voting rights. We deserve them. We deserve to have a voice in our country, in our government.
We deserve equal rights as men. We need to protest for temperance and equal rights so we get what we want and deserve.
Two feminists, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, worked together to continue what the Seneca Falls Convention started before the Civil War. Together, they founded the National American Suffragette Association for Women, and they were able to secure women's suffrage and in some western states. Another reform idea was educational reform, with the further establishment of public schools allowing new immigrants to become more intelligent and profitable to society. Along with more public education came increased opportunities for higher education, with many of the rich businessmen of the day donating large sums of money to fund universities, increasing the average skill of an educated person and introducing more job diversity. Starting in the late 19th century, sports such as baseball, basketball, and of course, football were enjoyed by many Americans as a popular pastime. However, the Jim Crow laws prevented black people from joining these recreational sports because it made it illegal for them to participate. Most sports were played by men, as women were seen as unfit to play sports during the time period. The era of the Gilded Age was known as a time of forgettable presidents and of politicians who were very ignorant of problems growing from pollution and corruption in the government from big business intruding on how the government was run. The era was very stagnant because not much happened. The South during this period was still behind the Democratic Party, which led to it being known as the Solid South, for staying Democratic ever since the Civil War. In the Gilded Age, public reform movements and political debates over economic and social policies were quite common.
Hey Henry, did you apply for the job that you wanted?
Yes, and I would have gotten it if it wasn't for the new Pendleton Act. I had to take a test that completely failed. A stupid law ruined my dreams of becoming a politician.
Well, maybe you can apply for a new job and be better prepared for it.
Yeah, I only thought that my influence in my party would get me the job.
After the Pendleton Act was passed, requiring applicants for federal jobs to take an exam, many parties were formed, such as the Greenback Party, which supported paper money.
They never won an election and soon died out, but their goal of increasing the amount of money in circulation did not. While Republicans controlled Congress, they passed the first billion-dollar budget in United States history, which enacted many acts to be passed that were pro-Republican.
Hey man, have you heard of the National Granger Movement?
No, what is it?
Well, it's this great organization all about farmers. They help us out, and they're going to help us in our battle against the railroads so that we can actually make some money for once.
Sounds like it could fix my money problem. I'll check it out later.
Due to the railroads causing problems for farmers with their high shipping costs for their foods and grain, and intruding on their growing land, the Granger movement was formed. The Granger organization created the Granger Laws, which were passed but were defeated in the courts. These laws were used to defend their organization of farmers against unfair laws. They influenced the state legislatures later on to pass laws regulating rates charged by the railroads. In the court case Munn v. Illinois in 1877, the Supreme Court approved the right of a state to regulate businesses of a public nature such as railroads. In a later case, Wabash v. Illinois in 1886, the court ruled that individual states could not regulate interstate commerce. Also, this is when the Populist Party was formed.
If you're a poor black or white person, the Populist Party is for you. We want the government to help with big business.
Good morning, sir. I am Jonah, and I am a poor white person. Could you tell me about your platform?
The Omaha platform supports the common people so they have a voice in government. And we even support the ultimate coinage of silver, a graduated income tax, public ownership of railroads by U.S. government, loans for farmers, and an 8-hour work day for industrial workers.
Thank you for telling me about your party. I might join soon. It sounds pretty good.
The Populist Party was a very popular party. They were headed by a man named William Jennings Bryan, who made a very famous speech called the Cross of Gold. This speech accused the government of favoring big business over the masses and argued that the United States economy could not survive under the gold standard, and argued furthermore that silver should be added into circulation to make it easier for farmers to pay debts and so on. It was so powerful that it made him the Democratic nominee for the presidential election of 1896 versus William McKinley for the Republicans. He narrowly lost to McKinley, but won the popular vote, indicating how the average voter felt about how the American economy and government was run.
I can't believe McKinley won the election. Who would vote for him?
I voted for him because that imbecile Bryan had become president. I would have lost my job because my company would have gone out of business.
McKinley won the election because many industrial workers were afraid that businesses would close their doors if the Populist Party won, because their goal to increase silver coinage in circulation would cause a large market inflation, making the cost of living much higher and the cost of paying workers much more difficult. Even though McKinley was voted into presidency to save factory workers' jobs, many of them lost their jobs prior to this in the Panic of 1893, which went on through his presidency. Overspeculation, overbuilding of railroads caused the stock markets to crash during this time, and there is another low point in the American economy, as the president continued to conduct a laissez-faire policy towards how the economy...
Also, there were many reforms during this time period in the 19th century, especially in the Gilded Age. Many political parties were formed mainly to protect the poor people in America like farmers. There was many technological advances and new markets that opened which increased industrialization in the U.S. The United States went through a dramatic change in the 19th century. Migration to the U.S. with the industrialization that happened with it transformed urban and rural areas of the U.S., which caused a dramatic social and cultural change. The U.S. during this period helped shape the country in the 20th to 21st century.